Hey guys, I don't usually do these types of videos. I tend to only do Let's Plays, but I felt like I had something to contribute to the overall debate, and I just wanted to get some things off my chest, basically. So today we're going to talk about Gamergate. Now I'm sure a lot of you guys know what Gamergate is right now, but I'll do a quick recap. So I think about a week ago, a disgruntled ex-boyfriend of indie developer goes by the name of Zoe Quinn dropped the bomb on Zoe and basically detailed various infidelities and kind of like dubious dealings that she had done, and a lot of this was actually backed up with evidence that he had collected from social media and conversations that he had with Zoe. So obviously this was extremely well thought out. He had anticipated that people were going to be somewhat dubious of his claims and had gone out of his way to actually demonstrate that they were true. So yeah, I guess kudos on you, guy, I suppose. But the result of this was kind of interesting because, I don't know, the news that somebody cheated on their boyfriend or something like that isn't necessarily something that I think a lot of people would be very interested in. But it was really more about who she cheated with and the context of that, as well as potentially, let's be honest, Zoe Quinn herself has not always been treated, or I guess you would say the reputation that she has in the gaming community isn't necessarily universally acclaimed and popular one, right? So she's kind of a character who has caused some controversy in the past and obviously continues to cause controversy. So we'll get to that anyway. So some of the people that Zoe evidently had affairs with were individuals that worked in the gaming industry either as developers or as journalists. One of those individuals in particular was a gentleman by the name of Nathan Grayson, who had a sexual relationship with Zoe and also had done some reporting on Zoe. Another one of those individuals was somebody who was a gentleman by the name of Robin Arnott, I believe is the guy's name, and he was is a game developer, I believe, and he had judged a panel that Zoe had participated in and awarded Zoe's game a prize. Now, the thing that's really weird about this kind of stuff is, like, on the surface that sounds pretty bad, right? But then again, you don't really know when these people actually started, interacting with each other, whether or not they did it, on a regular basis, who they were, basically who they were sleeping with, when they were sleeping with, and whether or not it caused anybody to actually do anything that was untoward, right? Like, we have no way of knowing what this is like, and unfortunately, we probably never really will know. So we're just kind of like left scratching our heads and wondering, with a lot of I guess with a lot of uncertainty about the entire situation, as well as a lot of kind of, distrust really for these individuals. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't have a particularly good opinion of her, but I don't have a particularly good opinion of Nathan Grayson as a journalist either, or of Robin Arnott as somebody who I would want to judge my game contest in the future, if I ever was so lucky to have a game contest. But you know what I mean. So I think that there's been enough damage done here in terms of people's credibility. I've left out some of the more egregious things that she's done in terms of her personal relationships, so I don't think they're pertinent to what I want to discuss. But I do think that enough damage has been done, across the board to people that, it's not worth going into too much more detail about her infidelities or personal infidelities, right? I think that's enough. Anyway, that's because all of this happened, what it did is it really just kind of just it brought something to a boil. Now, I don't think ultimately, I don't think Zoe Quinn is really the important issue, and I don't think that her behavior is really the important issue. And you know, if she's a bad person, which it looks like she kind of is a bad person, because you know, not just because of the infidelities, but because of some of the other things that she's done, and you can look them up, but you know, she hasn't necessarily been above the board in her dealings with people. But anyway, just because, you know, she's a bad person, it's not enough for me to get terribly upset about, and it's not really enough for a lot of people to get terribly upset about. You know, you would think that there would have to be more than that, and well, dear listener, there absolutely is more than that. So you see, not only is you know, how do I say this? So basically what she did is she brought to a head a situation that has been brewing for quite some time, and it's something that I think most people are going to be really familiar with. So Zoe Quinn's little adventure with you know, having affairs with journalists caused a lot of people to start wondering about Zoe Quinn's I guess you would say prominence, if you will, in the indie gaming scene. So, like I may mention before, like the game that she had made, Depression Quest, wasn't really much of a game. It wasn't particularly very good, and it got a lot of awards, like awards given to her by people like Robin Arnott. And it got a lot of press, like press coverage by guys like Nathan Grayson. And the thing that's always left people kind of like scratching their heads is like, you know, hey, why this game, if you want to call it that, is not really all that good. And if it's not really all that good, then why is it getting so much coverage? Why has it become like, you know, such a thing? And well, people are, this kind of comes out, you know, this whole fiasco with her and you know, these guys, and all of a sudden people are like, oh, now it makes sense, even though it doesn't make sense at all, really. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, ultimately, you know, at the end of the day, it's kind of like one of those things where you look at it and you're just kind of like, yeah, maybe, you know, this might have been something that happened. This might have been something that influenced somebody somehow, but it doesn't really explain everything. But it's enough, right? It's enough on the surface for people that are kind of lazy thinkers to start getting suspicious, and even people that aren't lazy thinkers like myself, you know, we kind of start to view these things with a little bit of suspicion. So that just kind of unleashed an avalanche of shit about the gaming media, and unfortunately, because Zoe is an avowed feminist and a little bit of a social activist, it started pulling in some other stuff too as well, which is probably neither pertinent to the initial discussion, but it's worth noting that there's just a lot of things that are just kind of boiling over at one time, and separating the concerns from each other is kind of difficult. So I guess the first thing to talk about really is just kind of like gaming journalism and gaming and the perceived corruption and nepotism of gaming journalism, right? The first comment I think you got to make on that basically is two words: no shit. Yes, I know that sounds pretty callous, but it's true. I mean, gaming journalism in general, paid journalism in general, is corrupt. Okay, and if you don't think it is, then you're probably a fool. Whenever somebody is getting paid money for offering an opinion, or for, you know, doing coverage of you know, anything really, pop culture, movies, video games, whatever, as soon as you bring money into the equation, you're gonna have corruption, because people need to make a living, right? So I live in Australia, Most of the papers here in Australia are owned by a gentleman by the name of Rupert Murdoch, which I'm sure most Americans know because he runs Fox News. Rupert Murdoch has this very right-wing political opinions, and as you might imagine, if you were to read the paper in Australia and on a regular basis, the majority of the commentary is from individuals that espouse views that are similar to Rupert Murdoch's. So if you were looking for various opinions on the state of the Australian Liberal Party here, you're not going to get them from any paper that's owned by Rupert Murdoch, pretty much. And that's an issue, right? I mean, that is almost undoubtedly a level of corruption. The gaming industry is just like that, but actually probably worse. And the reason is because they need to make money off of the people that they're actually reporting on, right? So Rupert Murdoch doesn't need to make money off of the Liberal Party in Australia, right? It's the other way around. They need him basically to keep winning. To keep winning elections. They need his papers and they need his propaganda. So when you're however, in the situation with the game industry, that's a really big spider. Wow, he's going to kill me. So the situation with the game industry, right, is completely different, which is basically like this. It's like, they need money from advertisers, right? Because none of these guys are really charging us any money for subscriptions or anything like that. And they need money from advertisers in order to be able to, finance their journalist endeavors. And because they need that money, they are going to compromise their opinions on a case-by-case basis, right? I mean, people pointed this out before, like certain cases where it's just blatantly obvious. Like, say, for instance, what was it? It was the last really terrible game to come out that got really great coverage. I don't know, probably like Dragon Age 2 or something like that. Dragon Age 2 is universally acclaimed by game journalists. I think they gave it like an 8.5 overall or something on Metacritic. You go to you look at the user reviews on that, and it's like a 3.5, and they just say, oh, that's just the internet hate machine. You know what I mean? The damn jerks from the internet. They just, they're just so hard to please. They're just so hard to, they just want to tear everything down because they're jerks, right? So it's dismissing of opinion, basically, with anything that you don't agree with, you just dismiss it. I mean, that's pretty standard for a lot of people, right? A lot of intellectually dishonest people, but that's what happens, right? But we see this, and then we see these reviews, and we see all these articles about, Dragon Age 2 or whatever, and then how it's the greatest thing, since sliced bread, and all this other great stuff. And then also we see on these websites, the banner ads plastered with advertisement paid for by EA for this game, right? And you think to yourself, okay, come on, guys, you're telling me that this game is great, and you're also telling me that this game is great, even though you're taking a bucket load of money from the publisher of this game to advertise it on your website. Oh yeah, I'm going to have some issues with that, right? I'm going to be really just kind of like not believing, essentially, of anything, because I'm a skeptic, and I'm very skeptical about these things. I know not everybody is, but for me, that kind of behavior is a real conflict of interest that isn't usually isn't being officially addressed by these guys. And the thing is about it that is just like, you just have to kind of accept, is the fact that they're never going to be able to address it, because their entire model of revenue is just like depends on this kind of like symbiotic relationship. And us as like gaming consumers, like, we're so upset about it, but man, come on, it's not going to change, right? Like, the model itself is just rotten to the core. So, unless we provide an alternate way for these big game websites to make revenue, right, where they can pay their writers and they can pay their bills and they can do all this other kind of stuff, then don't expect them to ever tell you the truth unless it's convenient to them to tell you the truth. What I mean by that is if somebody's not paying them to lie to you. Alright, that's the only time that you can be sure that they're actually giving you an honest opinion, or that they're reporting on something honestly, when it comes to games anyway. So this is the issue, I think, that the majority of the internet really has. And I think the Zoe issue, or the fiasco surrounding her, is really just kind of like, just brought a long-standing problem to the forefront. It's just made a situation, it's just boil over, basically. And so that's what we're experiencing right now. And the sad thing about it is we haven't seen much of a response from the gaming media, because frankly there isn't much of a response that they can give that's going to mean anything. If they were a little bit more savvy, and I'm surprised that they're not, they probably would have been all over. They probably would have, Stephen Totilo probably would have, fired Nathan Grayson. Not that I'm saying that I think Nathan Grayson deserves to lose his job or anything like that, and whether or not that would have been a fair thing to do, but it's likely that he somewhere violated some sort of clause or standard or whatever that they have at Kotaku, and he should have been the sacrificial lamb to go to kind of preserve the integrity of their publication. And they didn't. Not only did they not do that, they stuck up for Steven. Steven stuck up for Nathan, which is, on some level laudable, but also you start thinking to yourself, well, okay, so what are you going to do? Well, they didn't really announce that they were going to do anything after that for a really long time. In fact, it was probably a couple days later, and they started talking about, oh, well, we're going to introduce some new standards and stuff. And by that time, it was just a little bit too late. They probably could have gone and really been aggressive in saying, look guys, we hear you, we hear your complaints, and we want to make sure that people trust us, so we're going to do this, and we're going to publish this, and these are going to be all the new rules, and these are the things that we're implementing, and give us some time, and we're going to clean all this stuff up, and it's going to be just what you, our readers, deserve and expect from us. That's what I would have done. But then again, I'm probably a little bit I've worked in leadership roles in companies, large companies and small companies, for quite the last few years, and so maybe I think a little bit that way, and maybe these guys, being journalists, especially journalists in a cult hobby, maybe they don't, willing to concede that might be the case. So yeah, with the obvious I guess you would say, sentiment that the general gaming public has towards the gaming media, it is almost kind of predictable that this was going to end up going the way that it did go. And I can't necessarily say that that's a bad thing. What is bad, however, is the fact that it's not really being addressed. And I'm not sure, if it ever really will be sufficiently addressed, and like I said, whether or not it can be resolved in a way that is going to satisfy the gaming public. In fact, I almost wonder if it's impossible. But, that being said, there's a couple of other issues I think that are on the table that are pretty serious too. One of the things that I wanted to point out is that, before I go into the next little part of this diatribe, is that what we're at right now is we're at a situation where the media isn't really serving the customers very well, and they don't have a lot of the customers' trust. In fact, there's a good argument to be made that they've demonstrated probably, at the very least, a startling disregard and quite potentially, you might want to say even disgust or, for their customers, right? So us, the gaming public, they've kind of gone, I wouldn't say gone out of their way, but they haven't really demonstrated to us as gamers that they care about our opinions, or they care about the things that we say, or to cover things for us, or our opinions, especially our opinions on how they operate their own business as people that are supposed to be serving our community. They don't seem to really care about those things, and that's not an easy thing for a lot of people to deal with, because if you think about it, it's I won't say it's the only reason that these guys can exist is to have that kind of link to this gaming community, but is one of the primary reasons why they exist. And if they're going to continue to just kind of like show this level of disregard for gamers in general, then eventually they are going to go out of business, because they're not going to be able to get that money from those game publishers if they don't have an audience, right? And if people look at their reviews and they say, these guys are always full of shit, then they're not going to want them publishing or promoting their latest AAA budget title on Kotaku. So I mean, they got to walk a fine line. They as much as they want to do their own thing, and they want to express their own opinions, and they want to be thought leaders and guide people and all that other kind of stuff, and then as much as they want to make money by taking money from publishers for advertising campaigns, they still have to maintain some level of respect from the overall gaming community. Otherwise, they don't have anything to sell. Basically, they're completely washed up at that point. And I think it would really benefit them to spend some time thinking about that, because the way it looks like it's going right now, you give it like another couple. Given another couple scandals like this one, and one of these companies is going to just really go out of business. It's getting to the point where I don't think that the gaming public can really tolerate, or is willing to tolerate, that much more of this kind of tomfoolery from these guys. So there you got that. Anyway, there's also another issue when I start talking about how these guys don't really serve the gaming community really well. And it's a little touchy, and I'm not necessarily sure I want to get too deeply into it, but there is a lot of issues with their coverage of gaming, gamers, and feminist issues on these websites, particularly Kotaku. And here's the thing that's really strange, right? Is like I don't know if you guys have like picked this up or whatever, but I am a flaming, bleeding heart liberal. I would be the first person to admit that there is sexism in gaming, right? And that it is horrible, and that people treat women unfairly, and that this is something that we need to work on, and that my hobby is not immune from criticism in this regards, and all these other things. So I would be somebody that you would think would be a natural ally on these fronts, and in a lot of ways I am. But the thing that I don't like is how what we're seeing is a skewed view of what gaming is, what it has to offer, who's involved with it, and what they're trying to do. So a good example of this would be we start talking about, you would almost think that the average gamer is some kind of like steroid-addled, crazy, kid who's a misogynist and has no respect for women, and, is just this, Neanderthal type character. But if you actually look at real demographics, right, men make up just a little bit over half of all the gamers in the world. We are still the majority, but we're only just barely hanging on here. In fact, on a lot of different types of gaming genres and platforms and stuff like that, men are just like not represented at all. It's just like it's impossible to find them, and I think that's fine. But the idea that gaming as a hobby is incredibly male dominated is not quite as true as it used to be. Gaming isn't all about Call of Duty and first-person shooters and online competition and all that other stuff, although that does represent a significant portion, I think, of the money that's generated from gaming. It doesn't necessarily represent all of it, and even now that portion of revenue is pretty rapidly in decline compared to gaming that's available on mobile platforms, and while I do think that we're in a situation where games are probably made right now for like a specific type of person, and I'm probably that type of person, they're probably made mostly for me. I can recognize that, just like I can recognize my white male privilege, where most of the world is made to suit my needs. Gaming is probably a little bit more egalitarian because there's lots of different types of games out there. There's lots of people trying to sell different types of games to different types of people right now. And, people like Anita Sarkeesian even said it herself. Like, she's not interested in playing a game where you shoot somebody's head off or anything like that. But that's cool because, that's not gaming, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure, even though she hasn't necessarily publicly admitted this, and maybe she should, maybe she'd make some inroads with people if she did, that her probably initial impression about what gaming was has probably changed, right? You know what I mean? There's lots of different types of game content out there than just violent content or just misogynistic content. Even just games that have story narratives. I mean, those games alone don't really make up the majority of games. The majority of games are kind of like platform games, where you're doing silly things like running a farm or jumping over mushrooms or Lord knows what, and while I'm sure you can find some context in those games that's sexist, you can find sexist context in pretty much every form of popular entertainment that we have. So the issue isn't really just like kind of like limited to games, and portraying it like it is really disingenuous, right? So you gotta kind of wonder, like, who does Anita think that she's serving? And these game publishing companies, press companies, who do they think they're serving to as well? Do they really believe that, the average gamer, who I've already stated is, somebody like myself, needs to be aware that, a video game has sexist content in it? You think I can't figure that out for myself? Are you deeply concerned that I'm going to play a video game and I'm going to come away having sexist behavior? I hope that's not the case, because if it is, then, I'm going to laugh at you, because we've already had this conversation before. We had this conversation with Jack Thompson years ago, where he said, he was trying to push the viewpoint that violence in video games promoted violence in real life. This is during the height of the scare around things like the Columbine school shootings, right? He's trying to draw this really tenuous link between video game violence and real life violence, and we know that's false, because if that was the case, given the number of people that are virtual people that are murdered every year in Call of Duty and games like that, we would have probably, a body count of upwards of like 1 billion people a year or something like that in those games. I don't know, it'd be really ridiculous, right? But given that would be the case, you would think that there would be a noticeable uptick of some type of, statistical uptick, where we would be able to just kind of like easily identify, why is the world getting so much more violent? Well, hey, it's not. And that's kind of like what you would expect, because the argument that's always been made has been, simply that, this is just entertainment, Jack. This is not real life. We're smart enough to understand that. Why are you not smart enough to understand that? So, if I don't really think Anita Sarkeesian thinks I'm an idiot and that I don't know how to differentiate between reality and fantasy and stuff like that. I do think it's kind of patronizing that she's trying to, in the video that I watched anyway, that she draws these kind of like tenuous links between viewing sexist content and that it like will somehow warp the average male into being more sexist or something like that. I find that slightly offensive and a little bit disingenuous, but I'm willing to have that debate with her because she's not trying to advocate the censorship of the material. So I think that's great. The problem that I have is that we can't actually have that debate, because the minute we try to engage with that, the press just seems to not want to help us, doesn't want to assist us. So every conversation that we have around or try to have around the content of, like, say, Anita's videos, this kind of devolves into like this narrative of the whiny, privileged, misanthropic, juvenile male gamer against the helpless damsel in distress. I'm sorry, but essentially that's what it comes down to. Is the portrayal is that smart, intelligent women like Anita Sarkeesian needs the predominantly male-dominated gaming press, right, to stick up for her and her opinions, which I think is like ludicrous. She's more than articulate enough to come up with her own opinions and stick up for herself. She's more articulate than I am, actually. So yeah, I think the entire thing is just kind of ridiculous, and there's a lot of double standards at play. And one thing that you can always trust with the public is that, man, we can sniff out a hypocrite and we can sniff out a double standard from like a mile away. This is not something that we can't do. And I think that you'll find quite easily that a lot of the complaints that people have about the coverage, I guess you would say, or a lot of complaints that people have are really more related to the coverage of like, say, Anita's web series than the actual content. I mean, the content is just getting washed away in the controversy, which is really just like a huge disservice, because yeah, there are some decent things to talk about there. But how are we supposed to talk about those things if we can't even get past the name calling and the character assassination, and the idea that all gamers are children and they don't want to, they feel like their hobby is under assault and stuff like that. I mean, I think that if there was some actual real fair reporting going on here that questioned, the assertions or the hypothesis of a lot of the content that Anita puts out, and there was a fair discussion about it, and some fair reporting about it, that you would see that a lot of people would arrive to the same conclusion I think that I have, which is like, she's got some good points about some things, and some of the other things that she's saying doesn't really make a lot of sense and are probably not true. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be, she makes some good points, and I'm going to take those points away with me, and I feel like I learned something from it, and that's good and that's positive. But instead, we get like this entire just like ridiculous clusterfuck, and I'm going to be honest, I think this is only going to just go bad for Anita, because, and I'm actually legitimately concerned about this, because I do think that she's got some good things to say, and that she's got something really valuable to contribute to gaming in general, right? But nobody can get so, how do I say this? Nobody can get so up in themselves over time without eventually tripping over their hubris, right? I just have this really sick feeling that because Anita isn't being legitimately challenged, and because the press is enabling her to not be legitimately challenged on her ideas, that what's going to happen is she's going to cross a line too far, right? So to date, she's been very clever, and she hasn't she steadfastly avoided the censorship debate, which I think is brilliant, because that is definitely a non-starter for just, millions of people, and would automatically put anything that she has to say and just make it suspect, right? So, avoiding that, the absolute right move to make, Anita. Good job. But with a lot of her recent videos, I've definitely felt like she's starting to get really close to crossing that line, and I'm not comfortable with it. And the minute she does is the minute that she's going to lose not just my support, but the support of a lot of individuals, and they're going to turn on her, and she's going to go from... Basically, she's just going to become another internet scold if she's not already being portrayed that way, which she's not, because the press is being quite favorable towards her. They're going to turn on her in an instant, and she's going to become the next, internet scold, net nanny, essentially. And that doesn't do any kind of benefit. And I think this is how people make these kind of mistakes, right? And this mistake and this outcome can so easily be avoided just by legitimately and authentically engaging with the gaming community, and making it known what your objectives are. Anita, get them out there, get people to listen to it. And the gaming press, man, you guys have actually got to help on this, because there are some good things here that need to be explored, and some messages that need to get out to people, but you're doing it in a way that shows such an utter disrespect for the people that you're trying to get this message out to, that it's just doomed to failure. This is no way this is going to work if you guys continue to treat the gaming public like they're innately misanthropic animals. You need to give them some credit, and you need to pay lip service at least to the fact that you think that they're rational thinking human beings. And I don't think anybody's asking for anything more than that. And I think that's an extremely fair and just thing for anybody to require. So hopefully they will actually make some progress here before it all goes tits up. Otherwise, I'm going to predict that what will happen is Anita and her message will be sidelined for Lord knows how long. Eventually she's going to make a mistake, I think, and people are going to take that mistake, and they're going to use it to tear her apart and tear apart everything that she's done. And any kind of value, anything good that could have come from her involvement with gaming is going to be in jeopardy. And I think that, honestly, legitimately think that is a shame, because it shouldn't be that way. And it doesn't have to be that way. But people need to pull their heads out, essentially, and they need to stop silencing criticism, and they need to start engaging in debate with people. A good place to start would be, I know they're trying to do a documentary right now called the Sarkeesian Effect, and while I think the people that are trying to organize it might be a little suspect, I do believe with the premise, which is, if your ideas are good, they will hold up to scrutiny. So it does not hurt to go out there and represent yourself. So here's for hoping that this will actually be a thing, and that this will actually happen, and that we will see some more public discourse happening in terms of I guess you would say in terms of Anita's positions being given not just a wider view. We've got plenty of view, I think, so far, given a broader scope of discussion and debate, so that we can actually see and learn, explore, I guess you would say, explore those positions in greater detail, and really come up with getting that message out there to people. And hey, and it's okay if everything she says isn't, for the people that support her, it's okay if everything that she says isn't 100% correct, man. Even if she's only 30% correct, that's still more correct than most people are every day. I don't know if this concept matters to people or not. I would hope it does, right? You don't have to feel like you're gonna intellectually dominate or murder everybody who doesn't agree with you. The only way for you to have value and to be have an idea or an opinion that is worthwhile is to be not just correct, but overwhelmingly correct. So you need to be able to prove to people that you are essentially, flawlessly correct, and that there's nothing, you're completely immune to criticism and all this other good stuff. Nobody is completely immune to criticism, man. You know what I mean? You don't need to be so defensive. You need to get out there, get these ideas out there, engage in rational, reasonable debate with people, and let it go from there, because an idea is an amazing thing. Once it's out, it's just completely unstoppable, and it's just that's the bloody awesome thing about ideas, and is if we can get these ideas about how about gaming and sexism, and get this awareness out there, and I think that's really what people want, right? I think that's what they want, is they want awareness of the issue. You really get that out there, then that's going to be a net benefit. That's going to be a net positive for everybody in society. But the way that we're going about doing it right now is just completely wrong, right? And we need to stop with the circling of the wagons. We need to stop with the discouragement of debate. And we absolutely need to stop with the name calling and treating everybody's motives as if they're suspect, because that is just it's just the most ridiculous thing ever, right? Not everybody is come on. Not everybody's out to get you. Not everybody is out to be a jerk. Some people are legitimately interested. Some people are legitimately concerned. And let's talk about it. Let's not just keep flinging shit. I hate to say that, but let's not just keep flinging shit at each other. We can do better, and a lot of the people that are involved, I would expect them to do better. And if they don't do better, well, then I think they're just going to basically out themselves as they are, right? So either you are legitimately interested in the issue, legitimately interested in doing the right thing, or you are essentially somebody who is taking advantage of basically being a user and exploiting a very serious issue for your own personal benefit. Now, I'd like to think that that's not the case here, and that everybody is actually really well intentioned. So hopefully they will prove me right about that instead of proving me wrong, because that to me would be the most depressing thing, right? Is just to realize that we've all spent this enormous amount of effort and enormous amount of energy basically just to be victims of an enormous con game by people who are more or less intellectually fraudulent and not really interested in our hobby and in gaming in general, and that would be a shame. So hopefully that's not the case. Anyway, guys, I think I'm done with this. I'm going to try to get off my high horse now, and get back to doing what I enjoy doing over here, which is these kind of let's plays and stuff like that. Hopefully I've given you something to think about. Hopefully you come away from this maybe encouraged to go out and do something positive, right? Have a discussion with somebody about these issues, talk them out, really. That's the thing that we need to do, guys, is we just need, like I said, we need to talk this stuff out. We need to get it out there in the open. We need to make it a thing, basically. It's not a thing yet, but hopefully it will be soon, someday. Hopefully we'll be able to have those legitimate legitimate conversations with each other, and but until that day, let's keep struggling, right? Always struggling forward. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that, and hope you guys have a good one, right? Maybe next time we'll actually get back to my Minecraft Let's Play world. Cheers.